Hi guys, I am Emily Longretta, the features editor at Variety, and I am very excited to be here today with the team behind and in front of the camera for Paradise, starting with showrunner and executive producer Dan Fogelman.
Yeah.
Executive producer and star Sterling K. Brown. And of course stars Julianne Nicholson and James Marsden.
The thing that they do in Cannes with like 13 minutes.
Yeah.
13-minute
It's
applause.
The entire thing, we're going to do that. All right, Dan, I have to start with you. Of course this starts with you. This show kind of starts as one thing and transitions into something else. I want to ask where the idea started. Was it one or the other?
I had the idea like a long time ago, the general idea for this thing. It's been, I kind of write things pretty quickly, but I think about them for a long time before I start. And so this was an idea I had predating This Is Us, actually. Yeah. And I wrote This Is Us, and that, kind of swallowed me up for 8 calendar years. And then I was debating what I was going to write next, and that the kernel of it had just stuck with me. And I took a little break after the show ended, and then I just sat down and wrote it.
Which was it the whole idea, parts of it? I had a meeting like a long, long time ago when I started thinking of this. Have I ever told you this? I don't think I ever told you. But I had a meeting with a really well-known rich guy in the entertainment industry. And I remember as I was young, and it was still like in the shadow of like 9/11 actually. Yeah. And so I was really early in my career, and I was having this meeting with this guy. And as he was talking at me, I remember thinking to myself, I think this is like the most powerful, richest person I've ever been in a room with. And I was just like not listening to him. He was like Charlie Brown's mom. Yeah. And as I was driving home, I was thinking about it, and a crane dropped something in Culver City, made a loud boom. And I was shaken by it, and I was like, when the shit hits the fan, we're all going to be in the same position. And I started thinking about the people who take care of the people with great power. And then I started thinking about Secret Service agents and presidents, and it kind of became the formative thing that brewed for like a decade or two. Wow.
Yeah.
Sterling, were you looking for something very different from This Is Us when you took this on?
I think I'm always looking for something different. It's very cool when people scream out Randall, but it's a little cooler when they say, "Oh, it's Sterling Brown." You hear Randall, and you're like, "Oh, it's sweet," and it's thoughtful, and you know that's coming from a really wonderful place. But to be known for a diverse body of work is probably slightly more fulfilling. So yeah, you're always trying to look to do something different with the next project.
What was it about Xavier that attracted you?
I pronounce it Xavier. Sorry.
It was a big source of
It was a
conversation.
big thing.
Really? Oh,
We can take it back.
silent X. Okay.
No, it's all good. I think because Randall was somebody who sort of wore his emotions on his sleeve, and Xavier keeps things a little bit closer to the vest. He may allow himself release by himself, but in front of other people, he likes to present himself in a very particular way. I think he's probably closer to the way a lot of men deal with their emotions, and Randall is sort of an outlier in that way, so I think that was particularly appealing. Yeah.
Okay. Julianne, I feel like there's not a lot we can dive into with her because she's so shrouded in secrecy, but what was your initial reaction when you got this script and you started hearing about her?
Well, I was so excited just to read it, knowing, that it was coming from Dan and Sterling was already attached. But I gasped multiple times in the first episode. Yeah. So that final cliffhanger in particular. And then I was sent 4 scripts at the same time. So then when I got to the second one and I saw that it was about my character, I've never seen a single episode of television that allows such an investigation into a person where they started, where they are now. And I just thought it was so beautiful and exciting to get to explore that, and then to see where she goes, like that was a thrill.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
James, what was it about Cal? How did you kind of tap into him, and what drew you to him?
Well, first I was confused because for some reason Dan came. I ran into you at the Emmys, and he was very gracious and sweet and said, "I know we're not supposed to do this like at these events, but I have you in mind for something."
Pulls out the script.
Yeah, here it is. Here it is. Go over in the corner and give it a quick read, would you? Would you be a peach?
He says it went well. It was super awkward, and I was terrible.
No, it wasn't at all.
I was terrible at these things. And
No,
I
it was like
I went home and I was like, I really was weird with James Marsden. I told my wife.
The man just exudes enthusiasm. And you mentioned it was the president. I was like, well, yeah. But obviously, wanted to get into his world. Huge fan of his work and a human being. Now that I know that you're more than just that meeting, that awkward meeting. But I think it was the sort of unconventional approach that we took to this portrayal of a president. I mean, he's definitely a broken, sort of flawed man, and we get to explore a lot of that in the show. And it's not so. It's just the presidential stuff. So that was appealing to me creatively to kind of dive in and explore those dimensions of what it might be like to be president. You see him as a human being, who's carrying a lot of regret but is constantly trying to wake up in the morning and make a decision to do the right thing. And so it was very colorful for me, and exciting to work with these guys, of course. And so, yeah.
Cal's really funny and charming, but he also has this kind of sadness that's happening to him as well. Yeah. Which was more difficult for you to tap into?
The charisma.
That's facts.
It's hard for him.
Sadness comes
I wear sorrow on me. This is all me faking right now. I'm a sad human. No, I mean, I guess. Listen, when you have a script in front of you that is so sharp and so rich, and the work is mostly done for you, so it strikes a chord in you, and it takes away the effort, I guess, a little bit, when you have such, really, he's such a gifted writer. And so a lot of that was you're on something special when it comes with ease. And with, I get excited about doing it. So the sadness, the charisma, all of that, he made my job easy on set with all of it because of the writing.
I want to remind people that are watching that you can send in questions. We will be taking a few audience questions. You can send them in the chat. Oh, goody. Dan, how did you decide was it always planned to film in LA, film some of it a lot that is noticeable in the first episode? What is kind of that? What was that conversation decision like?
I mean, I've been lucky. We're talking right now in the midst of everything that's happening in Los Angeles, but I've been lucky to shoot the majority of my stuff in Los Angeles my whole career, and for me it was. It's kind of been when a show allows for it. Like I do the show Only Murders in the Building, and that's clearly a show that necessitates shooting in New York, but. For the most part, when Los Angeles and California at large can serve the story, like I want to shoot here. This is where my home is. And I think from the beginning, Sterling and I, when I sent Sterling the script and said, "Do you want to do it?" He said, "Can we stay in Los Angeles?" He's a very present dad. I have a young family, and I was like, "Yeah, we'll make that a stipulation." And it just, it's something I've been talking about a lot lately in lieu of everything that's going on here. It's a little bit more expensive to shoot here, so you maybe sacrifice a little bit money that you put on the screen, and you find ways to cheat around it, in order to keep the work here. We brought the majority of our crew from This Is Us, who worked together in Los Angeles for, 7 calendar years together, just kind of transferred over the majority of them onto the show. So it was really important to us, and you can get a wide swath of everything from studio lots to mountain landscapes to ocean to a million different things out here. So if you're lucky enough to shoot out here, it's a town built for it. That now is, sadly losing a lot of production to not only other cities in the country, but internationally. Yep. Yeah. And I think it's a time for us to be having a conversation about how, we keep this business going. So,
yeah, absolutely. Sterling, were you always going to be a producer on this as well?
Dan said, he wants you to be a producer on it. And I was like, for real? Like me? And he goes, yeah, man, you're in that place. You're a big boy now. And I want to give you an opportunity to do it. And honestly, I was never a producer. None of the actors on This Is Us were ever producers on it. But the way in which he sort of allows people to have a voice and feel included in the process, you almost felt like you were, even though you weren't in name. And so now it just feels like the title has been sort of officially, bestowed upon, but there's always been a level of inclusion and interaction that Dan is not fearful of. I think a lot of showrunners are like, oh, I wish the actors would just leave me alone so I can write. I've never had that impression from him. It's like, anytime you want to come to the writer's room, come to the writer's room, and it's just this flow of ideas. Sometimes it feels like they have to be a bit performative for me, and so I keep coming in to make it as regular as possible so I can just be like a fly on the wall, because I love listening to everybody put their pitches out and sort of formulate what the story's going to be.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's helpful for everyone. I directed a movie with Al Pacino, and he's like, Dan, let's have the cast out for dinner before we start shooting. And I was like, all right. And it was a big ordeal to organize the dinner, but I realized, he's like, if they meet me on set for the first time, they're not going to be the best versions of themselves. And so I think it's like, it actually is really good when Sterling and others like come into the room early, especially Sterling was in this thing from the go, and everybody was, it helps the writers, it helps hear his voice and, you know, what he is in real life and what they might not expect. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, we're going to go to a few questions that were submitted by some journalists. So starting for Dan.
Nice.
There are an abundance of twists and turns in this series with so many potential suspects. What was it like to create that balance between revealing information and intrigue while still maintaining mystery? And this comes from Morgan White from Scenes in Color.
Thank you, Morgan.
It's been a fun challenge. You know, on my previous show that I was showrunning, This Is Us, there was a lot of timelines and things to keep organized. This was a big murder to keep organized. I mean, you know, one of the things that I'm turned on by in television, but then alternately frustrated with, is when a show has a mystery and a lot of twists and turns and suspects, but it takes forever to start getting answers, and sometimes past the first season, and you have to wait a year and a half for the show now in streaming to come back on. So a big part of our goal was, how can we make a really complicated mystery? There's two mysteries here of kind of what's the big conspiracy, what's happening in the world, and then what happened to James's character, and how can we start parsing out that information so by the end of this first season you have a satisfying meal, like where you've been getting it a little bit after the first episode kind of turns on its head at the end of the first, you give a little bit more information in the next one, and the next one you keep getting answers, asking more questions until the end of the season where you kind of have it all. So that was a big goal for me, was to make it like a satisfying, enjoyable, like entertainment experience for people where they can kind of be titillated but then get some answers too.
Yeah.
Titillated.
I like that.
So do we know who killed Cal by the finale?
You do.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, the next one is for Sterling.
Yeah.
The dynamic between Xavier and his daughter was compelling, and with her taking on a leadership role. How important do you think it is to see strong father-daughter relationships, especially within families of color, represented on screen? And this comes from Misha Robertson from Kamisha Reviews.
Right on, Misha. Shout out to Aaliyah, who plays my daughter, who's absolutely, I saw her yesterday at the hotel, so she's here tonight to hang out with everybody. I'm very excited. I think any sort of, you know, I'm a single dad in the show who is grieving the loss of his wife. He's got his two kids, his older daughter and his younger son, and she's thrust into this position of authority and responsibility to sort of help become a caretaker for her little brother as well. So it's almost like we have to be father and daughter, but we're also partners in terms of like organizing the household as well. I think it's a really beautiful relationship. And representation is important. Like even in This Is Us, and again in this show, this absenteeism within the Black community is something that I desperately would love to sort of fight against with what we have at our disposal, and what we have is media, and what we have is representation. And to see a father who cares very much about his child, who's very present and wants to see them live their most full and fully realized life as possible, I think is a gorgeous thing to put out into the world. So yeah.
Absolutely. All right, one of the live questions for Julianne. Your portrayal of Sinatra is so commanding. She moved with power and authority, often associated with leaders. Was that a deliberate choice, or how did you prepare for it? And this is also from Misha.
Thank you, Misha. Was it deliberate to be a powerful leader? Yes.
Yeah, was there?
I think, yes. I think the interesting thing about her, and which Dan and I spoke about in our very first meeting, was to be able to see her sort of vulnerability and grief, and to be able to mask that or push that aside for a minute, and to be able to like take charge, take power, do what she wants to do what has to be done. I also think it's interesting because all of these characters are presenting as one thing, and there's so much going on behind, and I think that's sort of relatable in our everyday life too, what we are showing to the world and what's happening on the inside. So I feel so lucky to be able to play someone who's such a badass.
Seems like you are in real life.
She is a badass.
Like that's also the case
Total
here.
badass.
Well, James clearly has no real charisma. You are clearly a real badass.
Exactly.
All right, we have another question for James. Cal seems deeply shaped by his father's influence, leaving him with a life he may not have wanted. So, by may not, definitely did not want. Would you agree with that interpretation that his father kind of shaped that life?
That's Misha again. A lot of questions.
Again.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Yes, I think that's accurate. I don't think this position that he's holding is one that was ever something that he strived for or envisioned himself doing. I feel like there were other interests and aspirations that he had, but he his father was very powerful, very persuasive man, and was not great at taking no for an answer. And it comes from a long line of Bradfords who did exceptional things, and you're going to be one of them. You're not going to be you're going to get into politics, and I'm making a decision for you. So he is in this position, and that he doesn't necessarily want to be in. But I do feel like while he's there, he's made a decision and an agreement with himself that he's going to make the best of it, and he's going to try to do the right thing for the people and try to connect with those people. I think he's a very good communicator, and he ends up being very good at the job, regardless of whether or not he wanted to be there. But yes, it was he was sort of bred into the job.
Yeah.
Accurate.
And Dan, thank you for casting Gerald McCready again, because
Yeah.
anytime we can get Gerald.
Yeah, wonderful Gerald. Yes.
I told you.
Yeah. That was a sterling call. I was worried about the This Is Us, and he said we were fine, so I trusted him.
Told you.
Oh, I was so excited.
Yeah.
All right, I think we probably have time for one more. The last one is for Dan.
Okay.
As the creator, you are the architect of a new society. What were your thoughts and influences behind this task? And this comes from Anik Hoffman from TJ Digital.
Building the world. When we started this, I sat down with before I kind of showed anybody it. I sent it to two of my writers and producers on the show, John and Scott, and we sat in a room for like 3 weeks and just talked about what the series might be before I like kind of got charged with making it. And we talked to numerous. We watched the scariest TED Talks on all the conspiracies that involve the world. Like at times we were researching things that I was afraid was going to put me on a watch list. As we were looking into political conspiracies and all the stuff I did. We actually had I'm forgetting the name of the guy, but a very renowned sociologist and professor. Had him in his class. They wrote a paper for us, a 50-page like doctorate type paper on what they thought a sociologist might do in the situation that presents itself in the world, how a place might be formed, how they would do it. And we used that as a little bit of a roadmap at times of saying like, how would they try and govern? You know, what would be the rules? How would they keep the peace? How would they make people feel seen? What would be the big mistakes? How would this conspiracy cave in upon itself? All of that kind of stuff. So we did a tremendous amount of very scary research and and then you ultimately are just telling a story, so you make it up.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Well, I think we do have time for one more. So this is actually a great follow-up to that for the actors. What your characters' personalities, what was already laid out, and what did you add in from your unique experiences or any new elements? And that is from Tony Masello from Morning Blend St. Louis.
St. Louis? Man, so what was there and what did we bring? So much was already on the page, and I don't want to that sounds like a sort of pat answer, but he really does put a lot of thought and attention into each of the characters. And I want to say Dan, along with all of the other writers in the writer's room, because I see how the ideas get bandied about and how it all comes together. You bring yourself to every character that you play, but there were aspects of me that I actually felt like I had to, that weren't necessarily appropriate for Xavier. Like I probably am a bit more jokey naturally than what Xavier is, and so I was like, oh, okay, that's not something that is for this character. I have to take that out and put it somewhere else. And then I'm an intense person, but intensity is not necessarily what I share with everybody. Because I'm a black man and I know how scary that can be for a lot of people, sometimes Brown tries to mute that aspect of self so that everybody else is comfortable around me. But Xavier was like, fuck it, no, he's pretty intense, you know what I'm saying? So put that back in and allow that to be in the forefront.
Was there anything?
I guess for me it was I agree with Sterling. So much is already on the page, and then it's like, so by some magic, if you connect to it, and I did here. For me, the sort of the stuff to work on was I don't have as much experience with the those scenes where you're commanding a room full of people and just trying to really own that space and just not be scared of that. I will also, just thinking of listening to Dan just then, they also had this incredible Bible for us, which was so helpful. I mean, no stone was unturned in the world they create, and it was so helpful to have that to refer to. And you don't always get such detailed explanation of the world you're living in, which is really, really helpful. I loved it.
What about you? What did you bring?
Nothing really.
He brought the hair.
It was all completely manufactured.
Yeah.
But this is why I do this, though. This gives me a life outside of my droll, boring, sad life. So, but I've gotten pretty good at manufacturing it. So it worked out. I brought my body. No. I don't know. I mean, I think I just...
We also had a fake body. What was your...
We actually had a replacement for my real body.
It was a great fake body.
So sometimes he brought his body.
So every now and then.
What was his name?
It was something like
name.
We know they
Randall.
put him...
Randall? I think it might have been.
It was an attempt
like
not
that.
to have
That
James
makes
lying on the floor for multiple days.
Yeah.
And so they made this really lifelike cast, and one day I walked into my office, and it was sitting on my couch with blood dripping from its head drinking. It had a drink in its head. And it really scared the shit out of me. It was really terrifying.
It was.
Didn't they also do, like, headshots of Randall? I mean,
the
hair and makeup department is incredible.
Russell.
Russell. They just took that joke all through the season.
Well, and there was a whole running gag where I was sort of jealous of Russell, because I would come to the hair and makeup trailer and be like, oh, Russell was here this morning. He's an early guy. He comes in so that you can sleep in.
He never
does
leaves.
the work, making everyone laugh on set.
So they put it in my office, and I was like, I thought it was so funny I wouldn't let them take it away because people would come in my office and go, Joel. And then one day I totally forgot, and all of a sudden my little boy was coming to work, and he was walking into. I was like, get it out! It's gonna. It was like a dead. And it was too heavy for like one person to move by himself, and my poor assistant was like grabbing it over
3
his
years old.
shoulder.
Freaked.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's 24, my kid.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when the scenes, sometimes, most of the scenes really worked, but sometimes, occasionally would be a scene that would really be tricky, and I would be escorted out and replaced with a prosthetic knee.
If James was off camera, sometimes Russell would step in.
Yeah.
That was
Step in, So, I became a stand-in for.
Oh my gosh! Thank you guys so much for discussing this today, and I can't wait for the whole world is very excited to see Paradise.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.